Hi, we're sisters, Amy and Nancy Harrington, the founders of the Passionistas project. We've created an inclusive sisterhood where passion-driven women come to get support, find their purpose, and feel empowered to transform their lives and change the world. On every episode, we discuss the unique ways in which each woman is following her passions, talk about how she defines success, and explore her path to breaking down the barriers that women too often face. Today, we're talking with Megan Hamilton, a speaking, visibility, and confidence coach, a speech director, a musician, and a speaker. She is anti-patriarchy, pro-humans, and believes that the world can change once folks feel empowered to use their voices and we finally hear from new leaders. She's also a professional tarot card reader and recently created a coaching program that embraces tarot with transformation coaching. So please welcome Megan Hamilton.
Hello, you both. I'm so glad to be in your presence once again.
We're so happy to have you here. This is long overdue. So, Megan, start by telling us what you're most passionate about.
Yeah, I mean, really smashing the patriarchy and in all of the different ways. And I, like I know we sort of say that, and sometimes you know how you say something a lot and you sort of forget what it means to you, and then real world events sort of help to hone it back into the fire behind the whole shebang. I feel like the current systems are good for nobody. I remember I saw something yesterday and I reposted it. It was, nobody survives in the climate crisis, right? Like nobody survives. So, you can have all of your money, but what's going to happen? Money doesn't become water when there's none left. So I really have been thinking a lot over the last few years about who we hear from. And I think at this particular point in time, right, it is July of 2024. We are seeing some really big, fast, terrifying changes in the world that, many of us sort of thought some stuff was going to happen. Like this is how things were probably going to unfold, unfortunately, despite, a lot of people trying otherwise. And I think that it's because the systems were not built for everybody. They were built on very problematic, dehumanizing, not inclusive structures that literally, tortured and oppressed people. So that sucks. And, you can't, like, nothing is gonna, like, if we're still trying to stick to that structure, despite its origins, then we're just prolonging the inevitable, is sort of how I've been feeling. But to take the positive spin to all of this, what I really want is for people who have not seen themselves represented in leadership, who the systems were not built for them, but hey, they have really designed new systems that are inclusive, that are great for everybody, that include our health and the saving of the planet, and slowing down and taking all things into consideration. And so once more people feel that they have seen themselves represented in these sort of like higher level roles, then they will also feel empowered to speak up, to go forward. Like there's so much research that shows that if you see yourself represented, you feel that much more inclined to try to get to those higher level positions. And so what I feel like I feel like I'm here for lots of reasons, but one of the reasons that I feel very strongly is that I can help people who traditionally don't have role models learn how to speak up, speak out, cultivate a voice that becomes stronger and stronger, and to really develop their ability to change change the world, but through speaking up in a different way with different ideas than we have previously been exposed to.
Well,
How's that?
that's beautiful. And it's that's why we get along so well, because we're all about giving a voice to the unheard. And I think it's interesting to point out to people who are listening that you are in Canada. You are not in the United States, where I think so many of our listeners are, and they immediately identify with what's happening here in the US. But this is a broader issue. And even in a country like Canada, that I think those of us in the United States idealize, like, oh, but in Canada, everything is so lovely. That there's systematic problems everywhere. And that we need to be aware not only of what we're dealing with here, but what people are dealing with globally, and the past issues of other countries as well. So so let's talk about Canada a little bit. You tell us where you were born and what your childhood was like, and kind of what started you on the path that you're on today.
Sure. So I was born in Toronto, although I grew up in Mississauga. So they're pretty close. And as you know, both cities are expanding, they're becoming closer, if that makes sense. It's hard to delineate where Toronto ends and Mississauga begins in a lot of ways. But so I grew up in the suburbs. Canada at the time was pretty much the same it is now, I would say. Except that I think now we're a lot more aware of some of the stuff that's been hidden from history. Like a lot of that has come to the surface, finally, thankfully. But it really has been exposing some of the darker origins that lots of people did already know, right? And then some people are fighting against that. So there is a lot of discord happening here. There are certainly a lot of things that need to change. And, I think most people outside of America know that what happens in the United States affects the rest of the world. So trends, emboldenment and stuff like that. So we all do have are consciously paying attention because we know that what happens there will affect us, sort of around the world, not just those of us. What are we called? America's hat?
I hadn't heard that, but
that's my favorite one, America's hat.
So that makes Mexico America's pants?
America's shoe. Yeah, I don't know. America is the sandwich to Canada and Mexico. Anyways, so yeah, like normal childhood, normal growing up. I went to university for theater, and it's now called the Toronto Metropolitan University. So I have a classical theater training from, at the time, what was one of the best schools. And I really thought I was going to be an actor and a performer. And somewhere after about 4 years of doing beer commercials and having to constantly change my schedule and, not actually being the right person for beer commercials, like ever, but having developed a good relationship with the director. So I think they were just always trying. But I just said, are we allowed to swear on this podcast? I said, fuck it. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. It's not making me happy. It's making me stressed out. And this is, I knew at 14 that I wanted to be an actor. I really was quite sure about it. And so I always felt great that I knew where I wanted to go to university. I knew. And then I just was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I told my agent, I don't want to go out for stuff anymore. And then I got an internship producing with one of Toronto's at the time, and still is, sort of best theater producers. She ended up being the artistic director of Luminato, which is a huge art festival in Toronto for years as well. And so I got to learn from the best of the best. And I got to travel to Scotland to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. I got to do all of these really cool, be part of all these really cool projects and just see how things worked, like what it took to create something from start to finish. And I think around that time, I got a couple of grants to do some playwriting as well. So I wrote my own play and put it on. And so it was sort of a really interesting time for me because it was the first time in my life I felt like I had control over what was going to happen, in the sense that, like, oh, I can actually just create art and do it myself. I don't have to wait for somebody to hire me for a beer commercial. Like, so that felt really good and empowering, and sort of led to a period of time where I was almost rediscovering myself, because I'd been dealing with anxiety most of my life. I was agoraphobic in my early 20s, and then quite depressed, undiagnosed. We didn't talk about mental health in the same way back then than we do now. So this would be sort of like late 90s, early 2000s. And therapy, I started to go to therapy, and all of these things combined really helped me develop the powerful side of myself that I don't know that I had ever tapped into fully. So then, I started writing music, and that was a complete turn for me. I mean, I had never considered myself a singer. I'd played music most of my life, but I picked up the guitar and I started writing and I started performing. And then when I decided that I didn't want to produce for other people anymore, I was sort of getting tired of it, because it left me no room to make my own stuff. I left everything. I mean, I think, I was doing a bunch of different projects at the time. I was producing for somebody. I was co-producing in a bunch of theater companies, and people were mad at me. I had one person. I wish I'd saved it, but I deleted it because I just thought, I just don't need that negativity in my email. But he basically said, like, you'll never work in this town again. I was like, okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm glad you have that kind of belief in your own power. But anyway, and then I went full throttle into music, and I feel that I was quite successful because I am somebody who likes to do all of the angles, right? So I started a record label with my friends, and I was a co-producer in recording my first album with my friend Mark. And, we went to this small community hall in the middle of Saskatchewan. And I mean, like, the middle of Saskatchewan. Like, I tell people where we were and they're like, what? In Canada, most people will know what Saskatchewan is. It's one of our provinces. And, I did it all myself. I did the press releases, I did the packages, I did the mailing, I did the correspondence, the liaising, like, I did the whole shebang. And so it meant that I got to do everything my way. So in a lot of ways, I avoided some of the really creepy stuff that can happen in the music industry, because I had really not enjoyed that in the acting industry. But I mean, it was still there. Like, you can't avoid it. Just people coming up like, oh God. Okay. So one of my favorite stories is I was on stage. I am getting ready to perform. I'm tuning my fucking guitar, and this sound guy comes up and starts tuning my guitar while I'm holding it and tuning it. And I just said, like, what are you doing? And he was like, well, I could do it faster. And I'm like, get the fuck away. Like, I have been doing this for a long time. Anyway, just stuff like that where you're like, come on. What about everybody else here? You're going to get up and tune their guitars? But no.
And I get annoyed when guys try and help me back into a parking space. I can't even imagine how I would have reacted to that.
Yeah.
I know. It's bananas, isn't it? You're just like, really? You think I've never done this? But anyway, whatever. So then we sort of blew up our lives, my husband and I, we left Toronto. We were sort of tired of the city. We came to Kingston. I got a job at the university. I worked there for 10 years. While I was working there, I was working with law students, and they were doing these competitions called moot competitions, where they get these sort of fake law cases, and they pretend to be lawyers and come up with develop, their arguments and stuff, and they get to travel around the world for these competitions. And they were, they did quite well, but it's also very prestigious. So the school wanted them to do well because that would help attract other students. So I said, thinking, okay, well, this is a great opportunity for me. I had wanted to put some of my theater school training into practice in terms of teaching it to people. So I said to them, well, who's teaching, these kids performance skills? And nobody was. And I said, well, I really feel like I would love to develop a program. Will you let me work with them and pay me? And they were like, yes. So that was 2014. And, things have evolved a lot since then. And yet at the same time, they're quite the same in that the basic structure of my speaking training remains what it was in 2014 when I started with those students. And it's now, it's evolved. There's like lots more stuff. I've taken tons of coaching training and different modalities. And I, just keep expanding how I can support folks because, public speaking is really, and that's probably about half what I do actually, but public speaking is almost never about the training. It is all about the inner work, which is the same, as small business owners, we know that, right? Like one of my favorite things to say is nobody told us we were going to have to do all this inner work. I want to sign up for that.
Yeah.
And here we are. So now we're, and I'm still doing music and, still creating, but this work has been so, it's such a privilege to get to witness people, coming out of difficulty or just creating these magical, incredible talks that are life-changing for the people who get to witness them. It's wonderful. I pinch myself every day to be this lucky.
Was there like a pivotal moment or something that happened that made you make the switch from your earlier creative career to this career in academia and public speaking?
No, not really. I had a child in 2011, and that really shifted what I could do in terms of music. I used to just head out across Canada for, 3 weeks and do some touring. And that was certainly not going to be feasible then. But I had just started with the students because I wanted to. And then over time, people found out and started asking me if I could coach them for, their daughter's wedding speech or a job interview. Somebody had to accept an award and give a speech. So I started working with her. And the more I started working with people, the more I started being really interested in it. And so I decided to, and also I was starting to see the underbelly of academia and really not enjoying it, like feeling quite, I would say disenchanted, except I don't know that it was always just a Joe job for me. But like, as I stayed there and saw some of the stuff that was happening, it was really starting to bother me. And so I launched UBU Skills in 2018 formally and started taking on clients on the regular, still working at my job. And then I had decided that I was going to leave in April 2020. So I had started a program that doesn't exist anymore, but it was wonderful. And I wish it still existed because I would refer so many people to it, but it was called Make It Work Online. It was this wonderful business development program with a woman named Jenny Shee. And I've made friends there that are still friends to this day. And I built my business. I built it all the foundational pieces. And then, March happened in 2020. And I thought, well, it doesn't really feel, like a good idea to leave a very comfy job in the middle of, we don't know what this is going to be, how long it's going to be. So I stuck around, but as the universe does, when you're not doing what you said you were going to do, it intervenes. So this has happened to me numerous times before. Like, there was this basement apartment that I used to live in my late 20s, and it was so bad for my mental health. I was like, I need to get out of here. But the idea of trying to find an apartment was so daunting. And sure enough, there was a huge flood and I had to go, right? Like things like that, where I know I need to be doing something better for me, but for whatever reason, I'm not doing it. So, in the summer of that year, I was told, because I was the events coordinator and there were no events. So they said, we're going to have to rejig your job a little bit until we know what's going on. Let's just say, because I think I can't say this sort of publicly, but the universe forced my hand. And it was one of those moments where I could have stayed, but I would be betraying myself. And I said, okay, that's the sign. And so I left. And like, I had been saving up for leaving. So there was that, but the timing was not what I had planned. Anyway, so I did it. I took the leap, and my last paycheck was in August. And then September was going to be my first month of just being self-employed. I had been self-employed before in different capacities, but not for a long time. And I made 0 sales. And that was the first time that had happened since I had started the business. So the fact that it coincided with my first month. But what was really cool was I wasn't afraid at all. Like I had one moment, I think, where I was like, oh boy, if this continues, this is a very bad decision. But I really felt strongly that this was the right thing for me to do. And I knew it was going to work out. And then in October, I had a bonkers month. It just was like way better than I had made, at my previous job. And I was like, okay, here we go. And it's just the life of a small business owner, right? Because you just, I don't know about you. 2024 has been bananas for most of the people I know. It's sort of turning around a little bit and has been for the last couple of months, but January to March, April were holy moly moments. They were some challenging times.
Yep. We feel it.
Yeah.
We have
Struggle is real.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you have the attitude that we have, which is just like, if you're following your purpose, if you're living your purpose, then it's all going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think? I think this is a true fact, and if not, correct me, but I think the fear of public speaking is like the number one fear anybody has of anything in the world, right?
Well, I think
maybe.
yeah. It's definitely up there. I've seen figures from like 73 to 78% of people have a fear of public speaking. Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I'll tell you why I think that is. Patriarchy. But sort of actually, what we have come to think of as strong leadership is what is unfolding before us today. And so there's the bombastic, the uber confident, which I would argue is not confident at all. Strong statements, what's that word? I always forget the word, but it's like those really mega church evangelical leaders. What are they called? Oh, charismatic, right? We sort of, and like fatherly, like loud booming voice, somebody's going to take charge, somebody's going to tell you what to do. Like, we have come to see that as sort of a model for leadership. And then if you look at some of the earlier, like if you look at, for example, so my favorite book, and I've probably shown it to you too before anyway, is Women in Power by Mary Beard. And so, one of the biggest light bulb moments for me as I was developing my, the background for all the work that I'm doing is, even back to the early days of the forum, women were excluded. Our voices were called shrill. We weren't considered as intelligent and as men. Now, this stuff was so important to them that they wrote it on the stone tablets. This stuff is recorded. And so, especially as women, so then, you're just dealing with the fact that you're never considered as good as. And not only that, there is an element to certain people's public speaking styles that is highly manipulative. It's the same with when you feel a sleazy sales tactic and you're just like, oh, and yet a lot of people are duped by that. And so a lot of people don't want to get up there because they're afraid that they're going to be perceived as these people they've looked at their whole lives going, that feels uncomfortable to me. Something is off with this. And it's the fear of judgment. Right. Societal judgment is obviously a huge factor it's a control mechanism, but it's definitely a huge factor in what stops people from getting up. And also, quite frankly, in school, teachers are really failing when they're trying to help kids learn how to develop their voice, their public speaking voice. And so, a lot of people that I see were told, you're too quiet, speak up, by a teacher who has no idea that they are putting that thought into this person's head for the next 35 years. Or, oh, your voice is really annoying. Or, stop saying or ah, you sound stupid. Like, that one drives me nuts because honestly, nobody cares. So there's a woman that I really like to follow. Her name is Rena Ravanelli, and she has a speaking program that's based out of Toronto, and she talks about going on the Dragon's Den. Do you all know what the Dragon's Den is? It's like the Canadian version of Shark Tank. It actually came out first. Yeah. And so Kevin O'Leary I think he's from the Dragon's Den and then moved on to the States. I remember he was like in trouble for some boating thing a few years ago. So I don't even know if he's in the public eye anymore. Anyway.
Oh yeah, he survived that. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. So I don't mean great that he's alive because I don't think he was going to die. I just mean great that he that didn't affect him, because I think somebody died, didn't they?
Yeah, there was like it was a young person too that died in the accident. I think allegedly Kevin's wife was driving the boat and collided or something, and I believe the kid got thrown off, and it's tragic.
It is tragic. Very tragic. So anyway, she was pitching on Dragon's Den and was so confident and totally screwed up. Couldn't remember anything. Knew that, there's all this research on like the opening line is the most important line and like just made all the mistakes and absolutely screwed up and was like, still fought for it, but was like, this is it. I've fucked it up. And not so, because the message was so compelling that her delivery didn't matter. And this is what I say to people all the time, because I have coached TEDx talks where folks have forgotten their lines for up to a full 45 minutes. I'm like yelling at the screen. I'm watching remotely. Like, somebody give her a cue. Like, come on. Oh, it's terrible. But man, like, she pulled it back together. And it was incredibly powerful and moving. And, you can edit these things once they get online. So the point is, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to screw up, and you can absolutely come back. And ultimately, people care about the message more than they care about anything else. And so, when people are worried about public speaking, it's because they've been told all of these things that are wrong with them, that they, internalize, or worried that people are going to think they're stupid, all of these things. And then once you realize that when you're just speaking from the heart about what is important to you, you can get anybody on board, and from with an open heart, right? With honesty and integrity, not with putting all of these persuasion tactics on top of things. And so that's also why there's a lot of speaking coaches or speaking styles or different things that I really don't love, because they're all about manipulation. And they would call it sales techniques, or they would call it building charm, or they would call it, being confident. And I would absolutely disagree with that and say that instead, these are just, what's wrong with you as you are? Why do we have to put all of these different things on top of you and your integrity? So that's part of the reason why I feel, people get so nervous about it, because mostly it's fear of judgment, but it's also just these internalized things that people have been told. I had one woman who spoke for a living, had to give presentations all the time, and she had to take beta blockers every single time because of this internalized stuff. And so that's why I talk too about the inner work, the shadow work, because you can have that training and you could do it. It's like, well, it just takes practice. Okay. Well, she had done like over 200 presentations and was still freaking out about it. And so we did some shadow work. And basically what happened was she had this ex-boyfriend in her brain telling her that her voice was annoying.
Wow.
We've heard that from a couple different women.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The voice is annoying thing. That's interesting.
Oh, it's awful. And again, it's talked about in here, right? All the way back to the forums. Women's voices are shrill. Who wrote that book called Shrill? Was it Lindy West? It's I don't even know what you say about it. We're in 2024. Why are we still talking about women's voices, or anybody's voices for that matter? Also, and this is annoying as shit, but there's tons of research now that shows that people legit have higher salaries when they have lower voices. And it's just, and so I get women coming to me and saying, my voice is too high. I really need to lower it. And I say, okay, for who though?
Yeah.
What are we doing this for? Because if we're going to manipulate your voice in any way, that's damaging to your voice. Now, I am all for gaming the system to get ahead when it's really important and the stacks are against you anyway, right? But not to the detriment of your health. And also, honestly, anyone who gets nervous, their voice goes up in tone. It's just sort of like a natural, because you can imagine that you're clenching up. And so you're restricting your vocal cords, so they're going to be higher. So just even learning how to relax can be helpful with that.
So talk a little bit more about that inner work, the shadow work that you do. How do you lead someone through that, and explain what that is for people who don't know?
Sure. So shadow work was coined by Carl Jung, who's having sort of another, I think he's in and out of fashion in general, but I'm really happy to see a lot of people bringing him up again recently, because he was very adamant. So I promise I will get to the shadow work piece. But what I love is he was very adamant that psychology and psychiatry necessarily had a spiritual element to it because of man and women. See, I almost did it myself. Because of humans' needs for meaning. And so, a healthy brain is also one that finds meaning in living. And we often get meaning from religion or any kind of spiritual practice that we may or may not have. So I'm happy to see a resurgence in his theories, but he was the one who coined shadow work. So that is, his theory was essentially, there's a lot of stuff about ourselves that we don't like. And so it could be behavioral patterns. It could be difficult things that happen to us, stressful all the way to fully traumatic. It can be ways that we are that we don't like. And so we often, instead of taking a look at them, we shove them down, right? Think about, sometimes if you're lying in bed at 2 a.m. and you think about all the awkward things that you've said at a party or something, right? So those are the sort of behaviors that live in your shadow, and without examination, they sort of live under there, and they rule the roost, because fear, unexamined, will sort of take over and be the root for all of the ways that your brain gets you to do things. And so the idea of shadow work is to look in there, look into your psyche, look into the unconscious, the subconscious, and shine a light and get curious. So my approach to shadow work is very gentle. It's very rooted in supporting yourself and being very, very kind to yourself. You have to commit to that before you go into it, because some of the stuff that comes up is going to feel really uncomfortable. So, for example, there was this ex-boyfriend of mine that showed up at a birthday party for me once, and I got really drunk and I just absolutely told him off. And I was like, that would just sit with me for so many years, just of oh God, I hope and he became a huge, I don't know if he's big in the end. I won't say who it is, obviously, but he became a huge television star in Canada. And I was like, oh God. So, I'm always reminded of this terribly awkward, embarrassing moment. And he's just trying to be a nice person. But anyway, so that would be one of those things that I'd be like, okay, why does this 20 years later still fill me with dread? So I would get curious about it, and I would just start writing things out. And so the way that I like to practice it is journaling. So asking yourself questions, and sort of you keep saying why, right? Like a toddler might say, well, why? But why? So you'd say, okay, well, why did this make me feel crappy? And I was like, because it was embarrassing. Okay, well, why was it embarrassing? Well, because I got drunk and said some things I didn't want to say. Okay, was it the truth? Yes. Okay. So why is that embarrassing? Well, because I was drunk, and so I wasn't able to be in my fully present self. Okay, well, why were you drunk? You just keep going and going. And then what it boils down to is, this guy really hurt me. And I expressed that in a very, uncomfortable way. But ultimately, it was an expression of being hurt. And then I go, oh, well, what I really need is some sympathy. He did hurt you, and that really sucked. And you really liked him. And that's hard to admit too. But so it's normal that you would have this sort of reaction to that. And then you can go further and say, okay, well, what are other examples of this? And so you just keep finding these connections, but inevitably, every single thing that you start interrogating comes down to a wound, whether it's, and usually it can even go back to childhood, right? And so once you start doing that, you develop compassion for yourself instead of hatred or shame or embarrassment. Once you really start to figure out why you're doing this stuff, it frees you. You're shining a light on your shadow. It frees you to be able to forgive yourself, to have compassion for yourself, which consequently gives you a huge amount of forgiveness and compassion for other people. Because the more you realize where your behaviors come from, the more you realize where other people's behaviors come from. And one of the other things, here's a great clue for you. And Carl Jung talked about this too. Anything that really bugs you about somebody else, is generally something that you do that actually bugs you about you. And so anytime you find yourself getting really irritated with somebody, you can be like, oh, wait a minute. Where's this coming from? Oh no, not one of these again. And so what this can also do, especially for speaking, is help you figure out where exactly these fears are coming from. Again, they usually come from being hurt, forgiving yourself, and then saying, all right, well, how, if I know this now, what can I do to change the narrative for myself? How can I change that I see myself as a poor public speaker to seeing myself as a great public speaker, or even like somebody who can get up and do it, right? So you work in increments, and I talk about a visibility ladder. So it's like we never want to throw you under the bus by like putting you in a situation that we already know is going to suck, unless you have to do, like, unless you've been, you're scheduled to give a talk and it's really important and you've got to like get over your stuff. Generally, we're going to work in increments of slowly putting yourself out there in ways that are slightly uncomfortable, but at least then you can acclimate to that. And then we put out the next one. Okay, what's just a little bit more uncomfortable here? Okay, well, let's try this. Okay, what about putting up your hand at the work meeting and asking a question? Oh my God. Okay, well, maybe that's too much. So what about like sending an email to your boss? So we just figure out like incrementally, because we want to acclimate your nervous system to each new step, but we also know that there is some kind of practice that has to happen in order to get better. So you can't train your way to be a better public speaker. You really do have to like get out and try it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I don't know of anybody ever saying that to me before. Like Nancy and I still aren't great or excited about the idea of public speaking. Nancy's done more of it than I have. I used to drop classes when I was in college. If there was an oral presentation, I would drop the course, or I would find another, version of the course at a different time with a different professor. So who didn't make you do an oral presentation. So we've become really comfortable at online presentations and online doing those things, asking the question in a group Zoom or speaking or being interviewed. But there's still that but now you actually have to go out in person.
And that last step
on the stage.
Okay. So like I've been on stages since I was 14 and I'm 50. And I'm often asked to do the Q&As at film festivals. And so I was at the Kingston Canadian Film Festival doing a ton of them. And like the first couple, I could hear my voice shaking. I was doing all the stuff. I don't know, seasoned at this. And I'm like, God damn it. But like the difference now is I can pull myself out of it, right? I can hear it happening and I'm like, no, you know exactly what to do. And I go back to the system that I train other people with. I go back to my body, then I move to my breath, then I move to my voice, and then we get going. We're okay. Like I can recover from it. And then even then, again, I was moderating a Q&A for a music festival in June, same thing. I had to read, this paper that they sort of gave to me and was looking at it sort of in real time as I'm in front of the audience, and I could hear my voice and I was like, wow, boy, still, eh? But the difference now is that, nobody really cares. Like we can tell when people are nervous. I knew that people could hear that I was nervous. And for a minute I thought, oh no, people know I'm a public speaking coach. I'm ruined forever. And then I'm like, it did. Nobody cares. Everybody gets it. And, the rest of the nobody remembers the introduction. They remembered the rest of it, which was awesome. Also, I have to show you this. I just realized I'm holding this pen.
Passionistas pen.
This is from 3-4 years ago?
From our summit. Yeah.
Still have it.
When we first met you, you did a workshop in the first Power of Passionistas Summit in 2020.
That's right. Yep. In August, wasn't it? So almost officially 4 years ago. Yeah. Wow.
Amazing.
Still have the pen.
And they still work. I have a bunch of them.
It does still work. Yeah.
Wow. I can't believe how long this pen has lasted. I'm glad you like it.
It's a good pen. My other one ran out, so I was like, oh, I'll take this one. Oh, okay, here we go.
So you just mentioned your approach of standing, breathing, speaking, reading. Talk about that. Talk about those elements and why that's so important and how it works.
Sure. So for the most part, we have to deal with the what to do when things go off the rails, because your brain goes. And if you know what to do and you don't have to think about it, then you at least have step one. So step one is standing. So we always start with the body. We have to get the body into, the most effective way of presentation. So I use Alexander technique. And so we learn how to stand in the most supportive way possible, which also supports your voice, which also supports your breath. So you know what to do. You go right down to your feet and you work your way up through the Alexander steps, and you get your body into this sort of positive place. Then we move on to breath, because when we practice controlled breathing, we are getting out of fight, flight, and freeze mode, which gives us access to our brains again. So your brain, when you're in fight, flight, and freeze mode, your brain is flooded with stress hormones. It's flooding your body with stress hormones. It doesn't recognize the difference between, getting chased by a bear or getting up on a stage. And so it's trying to get you out of there. And so that's where we have to go, actually, brain, I'm okay. So you got to stop this. And when you practice controlled breathing, which is just deciding when you're going to breathe in and when you're going to breathe out, that's the quickest switch flip for your brain to go, oh, okay, cool, we're fine. So it will stop flooding you with those stress hormones, which cut you off from your memory and different parts of your brain. So that gets that going. Plus, we're going to deepen our breath, because we all know that taking a deep breath just helps us, like, okay, we're doing like a reset. Then we move to the voice. So when you practice using your optimum pitch, that is the most resonant sound that your body can make. Most of us, when we're stressed, speak from our throats, and we get this kind of a tone. Often, if we have been out of practice and you find yourself speaking for a while, let's say you're teaching a course or something, after the second hour, you're starting to lose your voice. I get a lot of teachers coming to me in October after a month of speaking again in September and realizing that they just need a refresher. And so when you use your optimum pitch, you're creating resonance in your voice. And that also helps to keep, like, the thing about the system is it all works together and works for each other. And so, like, actual creating vibrations through your voice also helps to, like, vibrate the stress out. And that's not, like, if you heard that, you'd be like, that is definitely not science, but it absolutely is. And so when you create resonance, you're creating vibrations in your body, which help to dissipate the stress or the places where we get stuck. And the reading is because I always advocate writing out your script ahead of time, word for word, because most of us, if we are stressed about public speaking and that stuff that happens to your brain starts happening, and you're trying to create a first draft on the fly in front of a group of people when you already know that that you feel really stressed about this, it's just not going to happen. And you're not going to represent yourself very well. People get into their heads that great public speakers are just like, say it or memorize it. And it's just not the case. Especially now, I'm finding I'm advocating more and more for clients who are doing, TEDx talks where you're supposed to be memorized. And I'll say, sorry, they've had a lot of trauma. They can't memorize things. So they're going to need a podium. And you're seeing it now. It's like an accommodation. You're seeing it now more and more, which is great. And that's actually a really good point for anyone who's listening, who has a TEDx talk coming up or any kind of talk. You just tell them what you need. If you're a short person, make sure the podium is not going to be over your head, and ask for something different or something to stand on. If you need a microphone, because, if you want a lapel mic or whatever, you just ask for what you need so that you can give your best presentation. People don't want to, I guess start to
Make demands. They want to impose.
I am in perimenopause.
Yeah.
Rock the boat, stir up the waters. People don't want to make waves. There's all the water imagery all coming out at once. People don't feel like they can ask for stuff, but you can, and actually you need to, because you want to make sure you're set up so that you can give the best presentation that you can give. Once you've given lots and you can sort of roll with the punches a little bit more easily, then it's different. But when you're really trying to get comfortable, get what you need ahead of time so that you can give your best performance possible. Because the more you do that, the more your brain starts to see you as a good public speaker, as opposed to a bad public speaker. And I'm just using those good and bad really liberally here, but we can absolutely redefine how we see ourselves. It just involves intention.
So for people who want to work with you, how do they do that?
Yeah. Okay. There's a few ways, actually. I did not expect to be doing this, but I am bringing my Thriving Visibility program back. We begin mid-September. This is a program for small business owners who want to increase their visibility and who want to be really strong figureheads for their business. But this time, I am bringing in 5 or 6 incredible guest experts who are really, really well known for what they do. So until the ink is dry, I don't want to be public about it, but we have a very well-known astrologer, highly beloved. We have an incredible tarot / ritual, what do I call her? Practitioner. She has a best-selling book that did so well in its first month. It went out of print and it's now has to be reprinted. She was actually just in LA last month. And she was just featured in Vogue. So she's pretty fancy. Another tarot practitioner who is also an author, a fiction author. So she's going to help us with creativity. And I've taken several of her tarot courses and use that in my own practice. And then we have a really rebellious business strategist. So she's going to explain to us that we can actually do business differently, and we should do it in a way that feels really good to us, and sort of how to do that. Then we're going to work on a little bit of human design, and we're also going to work on some intuition building. So we're bringing in these elements because, as you both and I talked about earlier, the beginning part of 2024 was so difficult. And I mean, I wanted to throw in the towel so many times. Nothing that used to work was working. And I got, scared a couple of times. But what got me through was my daily journaling, my shadow work, my tarot practice, my connection to, I have been cultivating my spiritual practice based on my ancestors. So I've been looking at paganism. I've been looking at animism. I've been looking at the different ways that, way, way back people would have been practicing, and finding a lot of great stuff in there and freedom, because it's not, something organized. I get to do it in the way that feels right for me. And it is absolutely those practices that got me through. And then so that was it. I'm on the elliptical one day and I'm thinking about how much I really loved Thriving Visibility. I didn't know why. I had tried to run it in January, and it was, I had everybody signed up, and then over 2 weeks, everybody had to back out because of the financial climate. And I was lamenting that, because I really enjoy doing it, because we write a TEDx style talk and then they get to perform it. And then you have this talk that you can shop to other places or use for marketing and copy. Like it's an amazing program. And then it all came down like downloads, you got to get this person and this person. You got to do this because this is what worked for you. Like this. And it's not, I don't believe actually that what works for me is necessarily going to work for other people. But what we're doing is helping people develop their own practice, right? To get you through those hard times when you want to throw in the towel, when you're just like, this is too hard. I can't do this anymore. So that's running in starting mid-September, and people are already signing up, and it's a max of 11. So it's a really small group. And I also have Dynamic Presence, which is where you get to work with me for 3 months. You learn my speaking system, and we build, it's really sort of cater to each individual person and what they need. So sometimes I'll work with people in that capacity if they have a talk coming up, or sometimes it's just somebody who wants to do better at work, or who just got a promotion and they're like, I'm going to have to be speaking a lot more. So I want to work on that. So that one's called Dynamic Presence. And those are the two main ones. There's a bunch of other little, and of course, Arcana Pathfinder, which you both talked about before, which is combining transformational coaching with tarot. And that one's really fun. So I'll just be like shuffling cards. We'll be talking about what's been happening, what they want to happen. And then we'll just sort of see, sometimes a card falls out. And it's bananas. It's always like exactly, it's either the exact replica of what we've just been talking about, or it's like, no, actually you're ignoring this. And the person's like, damn it. Carol's like, you needed to know.
That's amazing. Yeah, our friend Missy reads cards, and she always said, the card is jumping out. The card is jumping out. And I never knew what that meant until I just bought a deck of cards to play with, just to see. And all one day it just was like, got right out. It was like, oh my God.
You got to pay attention to those ones, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, you are not getting away without this.
It's the other version of the universe pushing you, the universe flooding your apartment.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
Well, I can't believe this hour has flown. So we just quickly, one last 2-part question. It's a little quick, easy answer. What is your dream for yourself? And what is your dream for women?
Oh boy. My dream for myself, which has changed a lot this year, because this has been it's the same for everyone. So, very challenging. My dream is to be curious, joyful, and live a beautiful life. I believe in miracles for sure. I have seen them. I believe that miracles can happen. I believe that change is possible. And I believe that we don't have to accept the narrative that we've been fed. What is my dream for women? So I really like to say women and non-binary people, because a lot of people, grow up sort of being, anyway, you understand why I do that. My dream for everybody, frankly, but especially for women and non-binary people, is that folks feel empowered to use their voices for meaningful change, to stand up for themselves, to advocate for themselves and for others, and to not back down when the traditional ways are going to double down because they don't want to crumble, but they're going to fucking crumble. And we'll rebuild a world that is much, much better for everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Passionistas Project. Since we're not only business partners, but best friends and real-life sisters, we know how unique and truly special our situation is. We know so many solopreneurs, activists, women seeking their purpose, and more, who are out there doing it all on their own. They often tell us they wish they had what we have. So we've created a space for them and you to join our sisterhood, where trust, acceptance, and support are the cornerstones of our community. By joining, you become part of our family. We'll give you all of our sis tips on building meaningful relationships through the power of sisterhood, and all the tools you need to thrive in 3 key areas: business growth, personal development, and social impact. You'll learn from our panel of Power Passionistas, who are experts on topics like transformational leadership, letting go of perfectionism, the power of community, and so much more. You can connect with like-minded women and gender non-conforming, non-binary people who share your values and goals in chat spaces, at online Passionistas pajama parties, and virtual and in-person meetups. And you can register for our exclusive series of online courses designed to help you tap into your intuition, find your purpose, bring your mission to fruition, and integrate diversity, equity, inclusion in every aspect of your plan. Be sure to visit thepassionistasproject.com to sign up for our free membership to join our worldwide sisterhood of passion-driven women who come to get support, find their purpose, and feel empowered to transform their lives and change the world. We'll be back next week with another Passionista who's defining success on her own terms and breaking down the barriers for herself and women everywhere. Until then, stay passionate.
Hey, this is Steven Stanley, and you're about to hear my song, Gonna Have to Trust You. If you like it, head over to my artist page, wherever you stream music.
I think I lost some trust in my bones, locked up now, I'm barely breathing. Feels like I'm stuck in mud, and then my heart got crushed, now it won't stop bleeding. I shouldn't have gone my own way. I should have heard what you had to say. I've been to dark places. I lost my foundation. I scraped my knees begging for something new. Just hold on tight so I can make it through. There's nothing else I can do. I guess I'm gonna have to trust you. 30,000 feet above the hard concrete now. Somehow I'm diving. And if I hit the ground, looks like I'm falling down, but you call it arriving. I've been to dark places. I lost my foundation. I scraped my knees begging for something new. Just hold on tight so I can make it through. There's nothing else I can do. I guess I'm gonna have to trust you. I've been to dark places. I lost my foundation. Scrape my knees begging for something new. Just hold on tight so I can make it through. There's nothing else I can do. I guess I'm gonna have to trust you.